wasn't Quebecois, right?
Right.
Because, like, her accent was very French, but they
Yeah.
could tell that she was probably not French.
Yeah.
And so she would speak in French and they would answer her in English.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yeah.
Yeah, especially, I mean, a place like Montreal is, like, it's truly bilingual, like,
Right.
full bilingual. I mean, depends on what area of Montreal you are. The farther east you go, the farther east is more French and the farther west is more English.
Right.
But, anywhere
Sure.
in the middle.
I mean, yeah,
it's
and
really
Ottawa's a little bit more westernized, and by the time you get to Toronto, it's pretty American sort of. Well,
right.
It's just like more English speaking. Let's say that.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
Yeah, Anglo-Canadians, and it's funny because when I was in Montreal, like French Canadians thought I was Anglo-Canadian, and Anglo-Canadians thought I was French-Canadian. So I just thought that was really funny. And very few people actually picked up on my Spanish accent. Which, I mean, oddly enough, whenever I hear a recording of my voice, which, by the way, like, I hate it because, I don't know, I think everybody does.
Yeah, well,
hate their
doing the
own
podcast,
voice.
I get to listen to my voice every week.
Yeah.
And it's just something I have to get over.
But I go, like, how come nobody realizes? But in person, it sort of blends more for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, a few people were able to pick up that I was like a Spanish speaker.
Right. So you're doing the best you can as an artist in your painting. You've got you have a couple of shows, 1.5, depending on how you count the coffee shop, right? And at some point, how do you go about making the decision? Because I think the next step involves graduate school, right? And did somebody give you a piece of advice, or did you? What led to how did you wind up making that next step? And why did you choose where you went?
I guess the easiest way to answer that is just life happened. I met my partner, and he is in Dallas, so that was the motivation to come to the U.S. I had the idea of going back to grad school. I actually had applied to grad school in Montreal, but didn't get accepted. And in hindsight, well, anyway, it doesn't really matter. But by the time, I was really, I had gone back to design. I had gone back to the same job I had at Toxa, which later became Urbania, I think. Now it's Urbania, which, the reason I'm mentioning this is because it's, while I was away from Toxa, they launched this magazine called Urbania. Okay. And French, like all people in Montreal know Urbania, or they should, but it's this magazine about, it's thematics, it's about Quebec culture, but it's very, I don't know, it's a great magazine. It's like visually it was great too. So I went back to work at that studio, and I got to work at that magazine, which I sort of went back to sort of one of my sort of first loves in terms of design, which is magazines. And I loved it because it really gave me, because I really felt, when I left Toxa the first time, I really felt like a failure. Like I really felt that I had failed and disappointed myself. So I really was, I was very happy to go back, because I really was able to prove to myself that in fact, I was a really good designer, and I was not a failure. So, I went back to design. And I started toying with the idea of going to grad school. I met my partner. We met online, and when we actually met in person, we kind of hit it off. And I was like, okay, how can we make this work?
Right.
We were long distance for about a year and a half, and in that interim, I researched schools here in Dallas and found UT Dallas. Mm-hmm. I really liked that program because it was a master's in aesthetic studies. Mm-hmm. The way it was structured, it was not an MFA, so it was not a studio program, but it allowed for studio classes, okay, and it allowed for a creative ending to the program, so I could do an exhibition supported with academic papers.
Sure.
So I just it was really appealing program. So yeah, I applied, got in, and that's what brought me to the master's to grad school in Dallas.
Sure.
When I was about to graduate, Greg Metz, who was one of my advisors, he was like, "Why don't you just do the MFA?" Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Well, here's the thing, like." The MFA at UTD is in arts and technology.
Right.
I'm really not that keen on the technology part, so I don't think it's a good fit. Mm-hmm. And he was like, "Well, just go talk to them and see what they say."
Right.
And I mean, sure enough, I was able to switch to the MFA, and I just had to do one technology prerequisite thing, but then everything else was I was just able to do it in independent studies. So I kind of got away with getting a degree in arts and technology and skip all the technology part.
So did you wind up with like a Master's of Arts in Aesthetic Studies and an MFA, or were they just kind of transferred your credits?
No, I was
that
just
direction?
Yeah, exactly. Just transferred all my credits, and it's a 1 year long. It's a 3 year instead of a 2 year program. So I just added 1 year.
Right, and so you got to be part of Centraltrak.
Correct, and I mean that was the most amazing part of that. My whole stay at UTD was being able to be at Centraltrak, and. I mean, yeah, that Centraltrak was incredible because, I mean, it really is where the Plexus installation was born, and like the concept was born there. And I mean, it was just, I mean, it's so sad that it closed now. It's just such a shame because that
is that a permanent? I mean, is it permanently closed, or is it like waiting for the next benefactor sort of thing?
I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm not really
right.
I don't really have any details whatsoever. But I mean, they say they're trying to find ways of reopening it.
Right.
It probably wouldn't be Centraltrak. It would be something else, but something like that. But you know, I think I really think in terms of the legacy of the university, like having a program like that is major, and it's major not only for the university, it's major for the city of Dallas and for the cultural landscape of the city.
Sure.
There was really very little programs like that, so it's really, I mean, in a way, it's a visionary program, and it just what brings to the table to the cultural life of the city is just, it was amazing. And what I mean, the exhibitions, Carissa Terranova, who was the first director, she did amazing shows there. I mean, they were incredible. And one of those shows is what really sent me into the research. I was part of one of those shows, and it's what set me off in the path to research for what became the Plexus installations.
Right.
But even what Hyde Fontenot did when he took over, it was just really a vibrant part of the arts community in Dallas. So I think it left a big gap, and I mean, I don't know. I really hope that the university, steps up and fills that void, because I think we need it desperately.
Right. And I've seen your Distinguished Alumni medal, so
thank you.
So maybe you have a larger voice there now.
Well, and it was really. I mean, it's great to be recognized by your university like that. So I'm really grateful for that. And I did say that on my acceptance speech, and I don't know, I think it's online, right? I think you can see it. But I mean, it's so funny because I had all these things that I wanted to say about Centraltrak, but I got really emotional right off the bat. I didn't expect that. I'm used to being on stage talking about my work, and even though, I mean, a lot of it is personal, but it just felt, I mean, I was so, I don't know, I was really overcome, so I don't know exactly what I said. I'm not sure I want to see that video. Yeah. But I do remember saying something like, you guys better, please do something about this, because it needs to be.
Yeah, I had another guest a couple of episodes back that had also been in Centraltrak, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but it was basically a residency with like 8 slots, 4 for MFA candidates from UTD, and 4 from at large or
international, national, some local artists. I think there was always, when I was there was always one Texas artist. It was a little bit like Art Space in San Antonio, where there was one Texas one. But, I mean, it was more loose than Art Space in that sense. But there was always a one long-term resident from Texas in general, or one long-term resident who came from elsewhere, but that would stay a long time. And then some people would stay 3 months, some people 6 months, some people just a month. I mean, it was... It really is like an incubator space. Right. And just being able to encounter all these different viewpoints from all over, it just...
And so, so your work, I guess that residency encouraged or freed up, gave you the time, the focus to experiment in a way that led to what we see as your work today, right? Yeah. Because the Plexus really started on the wall of your studio space there at Centraltrak. Yeah. Right. Up to that point, you were doing some related things that that all sort of ties together. But the Plexus is what really gave you, a trajectory, right? Yeah. And so, I think some of the earlier work I saw was what was called a postage stamp series, where you were doing embroidery on flannel. Yeah. And
plaid shirt pieces.
Right.
Cotton. Well, I guess, yeah.
Right, and so that was where it was, you were kind of taking imagery from classic postage stamps.
Right. So, well, let me back up a little bit. So, because the reason I started when I was in Montreal and I had decided to become an artist, and I was doing painting and collage. I remember that